the new policy or the new attitude of Donald Trump. Trump has halted all military aid to Ukraine. And is that part of some sort of bargaining with Zelensky? How do you find it?
What do you think? I mean, it's obvious. Look, let's parse this down into very simple arguments. Donald Trump recognizes that the conflict that's ongoing in Ukraine, which is a little more than a proxy conflict between the West, which includes the United States, NATO, European Union, um, using Ukraine as the proxy, and Russia, that this conflict could lead to World War III and a nuclear war. That's the end of all life on the planet. And I think sometimes people lose track of that when they talk about this, especially the people that fly the Ukrainian flag next to their name on their social media accounts as though they're somehow morally superior to everybody else. This isn't about them playing, social media games and posturing and all that. This is about life and death of the entire world. And I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to commit suicide on behalf of Ukraine, especially Ukraine as it's currently configured. This horrific, odious ideology of Stepan Bandera, which has taken over. It's not a democracy. They don't represent freedom. They don't represent anything other than corruption, death, and destruction. And that's without the concept of a nuclear war. I mean, Ukraine is the single most corrupt nation on the planet. Zelensky is the single most corrupt leader on the planet. Let's not forget that Seymour Hersh, who I respect greatly, wrote a while back that William Burns, the director of the CIA, had to travel on orders of Joe Biden to Ukraine early on, not to hold his hand and tell him how much. He said, "Stop being so corrupt. Quit taking so much money. It's becoming too obvious. We can't hide this anymore." Okay, when the director of the CIA has to go to Ukraine and tell the president of Ukraine to stop stealing money, it's becoming an embarrassment for the United States. You have a problem. And yet the entire mainstream media, who knows all about his corruption, they know this. They just choose to play the stupid game. And then all the people on social media pretending, all the government officials posturing. Zelensky is a cocaine addict who steals hundreds of millions of dollars and needs this war to continue to sustain his addiction to both cocaine and money. That's all. That's all this is about. And Donald Trump says, "I'm not doing that anymore." And somehow he's insulting people when he says that. "I'm not playing that game anymore. We're going to get out of this nonsense. This war is coming to an end." And for the first time, we have an official in the United States that's willing to state the obvious. Russia's been right the whole time. All this Russophobic nonsense, Russiagate, Russia. It's just been a democratic lie. Straight up lie. There's no any aspect of truth to anything they've said. And that's just becoming painfully clear across the board. This was always about NATO expansion. It was always about NATO expansion. That's not a Kremlin talking point. It's the truth. And we finally have a president who says, yeah, that's the truth. Russia didn't start this war. Of course they didn't start this war. Everybody knows they didn't start this war. But now I have a president that says that's the truth. And if you operate with that as your foundational point of view, which is reality-based, fact-based, the only option available is to shut this thing down. Shut it down. But it's not just about shutting down Ukraine. See, I think people are missing the larger picture here. It's shutting down the West, the collective West, and their desire to use Ukraine as a vector to bring about the strategic defeat of Russia. What Donald Trump is saying is we're no longer interested in the strategic defeat of Russia game. And he's backed that up with things. He stopped, U.S. Cyber Command has been ordered to stop all offensive operations targeting Russia because Trump is trying to send the signal, we don't view you as the enemy anymore. See, anything that's going to move forward from this has to be predicated on the basis that the decades-old policy of singling out Russia for elimination, for destruction, is over, that America's not playing it. But America has to get the West to stop as well. And so what's happening with this shutting down of Ukraine's of the military aid, it's attached to a larger problem of Ukraine and NATO and the European Union. I just want to again remind people, because sometimes people tend to forget these things, even though they're right in their face. Um, you do know, and JD Vance brought this up in the White House meeting, that Zelensky campaigned on behalf of the Biden administration to lead up to the November election. That he went on a campaign trip. He got, he went up to Scranton, had some artillery shells autographed in a very disgusting manner by the governor of Pennsylvania, a Democrat, and he actively advocated for the victory of the Biden administration, basically saying that Donald Trump was a threat. I don't know if you know anything about Donald Trump, but he has an ego, he has thin skin, and he's vindictive as hell, and his memory's like an elephant. You think he's going to forget that? The West may have forgotten that. The media may have ignored it. Donald Trump hasn't forgotten that, as obvious as made obvious by J.D. Vance's bringing it up. But it wasn't just that. After his November election, Zelensky, NATO, the European Union all conspired with the Biden administration to Trump-proof their policies. That's straight up saying that they are conspiring against the president of the United States. Even though Biden was the president, we know who was going to be president. We know what their policies are. So if you're trying to Trump-proof it, you're saying that you're advocating in direct opposition to the policy direction that Donald Trump wants to take America. In short, you've become the enemy of America. So now that we've simplified it, Zelensky is the enemy of America. Ukraine is the enemy of America. Great Britain is the enemy of America. Keir Starmer is the enemy of America. France, Macron, they are the enemy of America. Europe is the enemy of America. NATO is the enemy of America. So now let's take a look at what Trump is doing here. The UK, as part of their Trump proofing, entered a secret deal with Ukraine, basically where Ukraine turned over their mineral rights to the United Kingdom in exchange for 100 years of security guarantees. And this was what the British told the Ukrainians is, we've got a special relationship with America. You sign this over, we guarantee your security because we will make sure America's trapped into this. You can't trap Donald Trump. And so Trump basically countered with his own mineral deal that Zelensky can't sign. That's what's going on here. Zelensky can't admit that he sold everything to the British, but he can't sign that agreement too. And Trump's calling him out. And in the process, he's calling out Great Britain. And in the process, he's calling out NATO. He's basically saying, you are my enemy. You're my stated enemy. Keir Starmer, you have went behind my back to have a secret deal with Ukraine designed to trap me, the president of the United States. You can't trap me. I've trapped you. He's turned the tables on them. And so, what is Europe to do? He's shut down this military aid until which time Zelensky signs the mineral agreement. But Zelensky can't sign the mineral agreement because of the UK agreement, which means that ultimately the UK is going to have to make null and void its agreement. It's a big game being played here. There's only one player that is in a position to win. That's Donald Trump. Europe, NATO, Ukraine have decided to go to war against America. Literally, a war that could take us down the path towards a nuclear conflict. Donald Trump's in the business of making America great again. That's his stated policy. So what we're seeing here about starving out Ukrainian assets by shutting down military shipments, part of a bigger game being played where we're going to shut down England. We're going to shut down Europe. We're going to shut down NATO until they do exactly what we want them to do, when we tell them to do it, how we tell them to do it. There is no such thing as an independent Europe, independent NATO, independent Ukraine. Everybody works for us, and they will obey our orders or they will be destroyed in the process. That's the signal that's being sent here by Donald Trump. This isn't just about shutting off the spigot for Ukraine weapons. This is about the United States telling Europe, NATO, Ukraine, either you line up, when I say with us, I mean behind us, because I'm the leader. You will follow me, and we're taking you to a path of peace with Russia, or I destroy you.
Right after the meeting between Zelensky and Stormer, it seems that the pressure coming from Washington to the United Kingdom made them to decide to convince Zelensky.
They've been called out. They've been caught out. This isn't about just Ukraine. This is about the British government realizing that they are throwing away a special relationship, that Donald Trump is going to shut them down instantly. You can't bribe Trump with a meeting to, a state visit to the king. I mean, okay, you're Donald Trump. Keir Starmer comes and says, here's an envelope. It's so special. It's from the king. The king wants to invite you for a state visit. It's really a unique honor. And then the stinky, smelly cocaine addict leaves the White House, goes there and gets an audience with the king. Cheapens it. What is the king? He is a prostitute for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer farms him out. Hey, I need you to impress Trump. Go have, you're going to go meet with Trump and all that. So, so the king now has to do that. But I don't think that meeting is going to happen. I can't speak for Donald Trump, but I don't imagine Donald Trump's going to take sloppy seconds from Zelensky. All right. Zelensky went and the king basically prostituted himself out. Said, oh, you need me to meet with literally a cocaine addict who is corrupt as the day is long, who is a disgusting individual. And the king had to meet with this person because Keir Starmer wanted to send a political signal. All Keir Starmer did is prove that the king's a whore. Said, I'm sorry, Great Britain, but you allowed Keir Starmer to prostitute out your king. The king's a whore. And you think the president of the United States is going to go and meet with this whore after he's dirtied himself with the cocaine addict? No. And so the English are desperate. They blew it. And now Keir Starmer's stuck with the fact that he has a secret 100-year deal with Zelensky that's going to have to be canceled. That's going to be humiliating for him. But what do they got? Nothing. We're going to put boots on the ground, planes in the air. Well, I can't do it without America's help. And America said, you don't got our help. The French, we're going to be there for you, but we're not. Italy finally got smart and said, no, we're not even playing this stupid game. The Poles, we're not playing this stupid game. Europe's falling apart. There is no European unity. That was the beauty of that meeting. I love the fact that they at least were honest enough to keep the Baltic states out of there because they're nothing. It's high time Europe just shut them down, literally, and just say, no, you're done. We don't want to hear your yapping anymore. We're not going to let you drag us into this war. Poland's getting the big picture. Well, wait a minute. If this all goes south, all those American troops on our soil are going to leave. Yes, they are. And they're going to leave no matter what. You think we're going to keep American troops in Poland once we have peace with Russia? No, we're not. The Baltics will be abandoned. It will all be abandoned. Europe's just coming to grips with the fact that this entire enterprise that they bought into, which is supposed to be led by the United States, that there's in fact a revolution taking place in America today, a fundamental revolution that redefines how America operates internally and how we deal with the world. Many people didn't believe it was right. We're not one of these countries that when we come in and we take over, we take the ancient regime to the town square with the guillotine and off with their heads. Maybe we should. Because what's happening right now is the Democrats are making phone calls and telling people, don't worry about this. We have the establishment. We have established practices. This is just a temporary glitch in America. We'll be back. No, you won't. By the time this is done, there will be a significant number of those Democrats frog marched off to prison where they belong. The corruption that's being exposed is manifest. It's exposing America as maybe one of the most corrupt nations on the planet on how we operated. Trump's taking that whole system down, for better or for worse. There's people out there that hate him because he's using Elon Musk. Who the hell did you want him to use? The inspector generals? The ones that came up through the establishment and controlled by the Democrats? And they're supposed to investigate that which they're really there to protect. No, you have to decapitate, remove them. You bring in Elon Musk and the outsiders and say, because Elon Musk doesn't care. There's no sacred cows for him. He's not coming and saying, well, I have to protect this because, this person needs the money and I have to protect this because I made a deal with this person. I have to protect this. No, he's coming and saying, if it doesn't make sense, get rid of it. And it's hurting a lot of people, I admit, but that's one of the things the Democrats have done over the years. I mean, I love it when people go, you're hurting veterans. Just because you're a veteran doesn't mean you have guaranteed job security in the federal government in a job position that's simply there to sustain corruption. I'm sorry. Get a real job. You know, if the government wants to employ you, then there has to be a real job there that makes real sense. Because a lot of these jobs are just about moving paper, stamping paper, and sustaining bureaucratic inefficiencies. And so that's what Elon Musk is doing. But the Democrats hate that. That's so bad. You can't do that. There's no precedent. Guys, it's a revolution. There's not meant to be precedent. It's meant to be precedent setting. And that's what's happening here. The Democrats are trying to tell the Europeans to hang on, but there's nothing to hang on to. And they're starting to realize it. One by one, the European countries are starting to go, holy cow, we're a 1 month into a 4-year term. And ain't nothing stopping this guy. This guy's just coming at us, coming at us, coming at us. It's not like at the end of the term where you go, all we have to do is hold on for 6 more months. Then there's an election. The election cycle takes over. Things calm down. He's 1 month in to a 4-year term where he says, I'm taking the whole thing down. And he's going to take the whole thing down. And that's what's happening here. It's just basically we have a bunch of crying taking place as people realize that, the corruption that sustained them, empowered them, defined them for the past several decades is being done away with, both here in the United States and abroad.
We had huge repercussions in the United States in the mainstream media after the meeting between Donald Trump and Zelensky. And here is what J.D. Vance pointed out in his interview with Sean Hannity on Fox News. And he's talking about the differences they're having with the Biden administration in terms of dealing with Ukraine.
When you would talk to the Biden administration officials in private, it's another example of a terrible situation the Biden admin left the Trump administration. When you ask them what's the plan, okay, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. What is your plan? And they would honestly tell you, well, we're just going to send them weapons for as long as we can and hope eventually they can turn the tide. Hope is not a strategy. Throwing money and ammunition at a terrible conflict, that is not a strategy. The only guy in town with a strategy is the President of the United States, and everybody needs to follow his lead.
What scares me is Zelensky, when he says it's going to go on for years.
Yeah. The way he's talking about, it's the same sort of manner that you see with the European countries, by the way. It's not just about the Biden administration. They're totally unified in that sort of policy toward Ukraine. But when you see the Trump administration is trying to change it, is trying to reshape it, the way that they're seeing the conflict in Ukraine, you see huge repercussions in the mainstream media. They're attacking viciously the current administration. How do you see the way that Donald Trump is trying to deal with them, Scott?
Well,
because
I think we have to be careful with semantics here. The Trump administration isn't trying anything. They're doing it. His opponents are trying to stop him. They can't. Okay, this is a steamroller. This isn't trying. This isn't people asking permission. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He's the commander in chief, for better or for worse. There are consequences to elections. And the consequence of electing him is not trying to make these changes, Nima. He's making these changes. It will happen. Nothing will stop him. Part of the problem is that the mainstream media was part of this corrupt Democratic establishment. We know this, Nima. Let's not beat around the bush. How many hundreds of millions, hell, billions of dollars of USAID money of U.S. government went into funding this media establishment? You know it. You know it. It's there. The reports are there. So let's stop pretending that the mainstream establishment is the conscience of America. The mainstream establishment is the voice of the corrupt, Democratic-dominated deep state that Donald Trump's destroying. So you're not hearing protest from legitimate journalistic outlets. You're hearing the screams of the soon-to-be disenfranchised. All right? What have they been replaced with? X, for better or for worse. X is the driver right now. Literally. I mean, I don't know how it got to this. I don't know if I even like it. Except that when you have something as corrupt as the mainstream establishment, it has to die. I'm sorry. The New York Times literally has to go bankrupt. The Washington Post has to go bankrupt. The entire system, MSNBC, CNN, all this, they have to fail, collapse, be brought down to nothing. And those who funded them must be destroyed, not just financially, but politically, so that they have no credibility. They've been exposed for the facilitators of intellectual corruption that they have been doing now for decades. We have to clean the whole thing. And the way you do that is you choke off the money. And that's what Trump is doing. That's what Elon Musk is doing, shutting it down. And they're screaming to high heaven. But no one cares. No one cares because they don't have influence anymore. They don't move the needle. I mean, we are at a state in America today where a Joe Rogan interview is the equivalent of what a Meet the Press interview used to be. I mean, my God, when I was coming up through my, political maturity, as and back when I was doing national security stuff, the Sunday talk shows, that was it. That was it. You got on a Sunday talk show and you made the big league. I mean, I remember when I would get invited onto them. It's like, there I am, Meet the Press, speaking with the man who's literally defining the news cycle for the next week. Ted Koppel. Good Lord, if you get on Ted Koppel, you were doing well. Got that interview with Tom Brokaw. Man, you hit it out of the ballpark. You're there. You're in the driver's seat. That's the way it used to be. No one gives a damn about them anymore. I mean, what do they got? Caitlin Collins at CNN. She's a joke. A joke. There's no serious journalists out there anymore. Name one. I challenge you. Name one. One serious journalist in the mainstream. You can't. They're all corrupted. They've all been, exposed as the empty suits that they are. So Joe Rogan now is the news driver. You get on Joe Rogan, everybody will be talking about you for the next week. You are defining the news cycle. How did that happen? Because of the corruption of the mainstream media. Because nobody cares about them anymore. I mean, the Democrats are desperately clawing onto them. But what? We get to watch Don Lemon trip and spill a cake so we can celebrate a birthday with him. That's the kind of artificiality that exists with there. Joe Rogan's calling people in, having an honest-to-God conversation with them. Tucker Carlson's having a conversation. There's conversations taking place today that could never take place in the past. Because this is a revolution. It's a revolution in every aspect of how we define ourselves as a nation, as a society. And the mainstream media is being flushed down the toilet of life, as it should be, because it just stunk. It was just sitting there, stinking, not contributing positively to anything. Flush the toilet, get rid of it. Let's get something new. Do we have to work on crafting this new stuff? Yeah, once the revolution's done, though. Right now, we're in a revolutionary period, so I'm sick and tired of people complaining about this, that, and the other thing. It ain't supposed to be pretty. It's supposed to be revolutionary. We're 1 month into it. Wait till we're 6 months into it. It's going to get ugly. I don't know what the president's going to say tonight, but I would imagine that he's going to say things similar to what I'm saying right now. Buckle up, because it's going to get serious. We are changing the direction of this country, and we have to, because this country is going straight to hell. I don't know how many times I have to tell people, had Kamala Harris won this election, we'd be midway to a thermonuclear war right now that would have happened by the summer of 2025, and we'd all be dead. Because that's a sickness of the Biden approach, sickness of her approach, the sickness of the establishment. The whole thing, Nima, is a Ponzi scheme. The way the American system worked was a Ponzi scheme predicated on the absolute necessity to have chaos and anarchy, to have conflict in the world that justified the defense-centric spending of America. The military-industrial congressional complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned about was alive and well and living and thriving. But it's a Ponzi scheme. It's never about to achieve stability. It's always about the next scam to get people to invest money up. And eventually, your crises bring you to a culminating point at the top, which is nuclear war, because there's nowhere else to go. That's where we were. We were at the tip of the Ponzi scheme. And thank God Donald Trump came in and went, no, I'm not doing that anymore. Screw it. Bam. Knocked the whole thing down. And it's going to be a beautiful thing to watch that Ponzi scheme collapse. I'm sorry for the people who are going to lose their jobs. I'm sorry for the suffering they have. But you know what? You bought into a system, unquestioningly, that was going to lead us all down the path of hell. And so therefore, I'm not sorry. You're healthy. Go find new work. Find something constructive in society. But maybe you shouldn't have been a government employee, because what was that? Government employee sitting at a desk doing what? Did you really ask what you were doing? Did you really ask what you were trying to accomplish? My daughter went to Georgetown University. She just graduated last May with a master's degree in Southern Caucasus affairs. Good degree to have, in theory. All of her classmates, without exception, were either military foreign area officers or State Department people, or maybe other government agencies pretending to be State Department people. We never know. But most of them were from the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, or the derivatives thereof. U.S. government programs, funded programs that were in Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, trying to collapse a government, literally trying to collapse the government of Georgia Dream and impose an American-driven solution to a Georgian problem. They knew it. They all knew what they were doing. You want me to cry for these people when they lost their job? When your job was to go abroad and destroy a society? I just had an interview with just a fantastic guy. His name was Konstantin Kevorkian, I think. He's a journalist with Ukraine.ru. We had a long conversation as part of my new the Russia House program. But he talked about how in the 90s, because he kept saying, America, stop talking about 2014 and the American involvement there. Stop talking about 2004, 2005, the Orange Revolution, the American involvement there. He said this was in the 1990s. In the 1990s, he was part of the group of Ukrainians that were being lured in by USAID, taken on these junkets into the United States, where they would go to the White House, go to the Pentagon, get the briefings, and they were being coordinated by the American Ukrainian diaspora, the Banderists, working with the United States to inject the Banderist ideology back into Ukraine. For what purpose? To bring down that government, to install their own government, to create the situation we have today. It's been a process decades long in the making, and it almost worked. You want me to cry for the people that lost their jobs who were doing that? That's not how we define America. That's not how America should be defined. If you worked in the government, you were working to sustain corruption. Literally. One way or another, you're sustaining corruption. So yeah, you lose your job. Does that mean that there's no need for government? No. But it does mean that maybe 9 out of 10 jobs that we were funding with American taxpayer money shouldn't be funded. Maybe it means entire administrations need to be done away with, because what are they doing? There were schools in America before the Department of Education. So the Department of Education doesn't actually equate to better educated Americans. In fact, since the Department of Education's come in, the quality of education in America has plummeted dramatically. Now, I'm not saying there's a cause-effect relationship. I am saying that obviously that's not the solution. So then you have to ask yourself, why is the Department of Education there? What are they accomplishing? Why are we spending this money on it? Well, maybe it's part of an establishment designed to take control, to manipulate, to sustain, to enrich. We're finding out a lot of this money went down to the wives of people who headed up a non-governmental organization to teach, Afghan women, the benefits of erotic art or something like that. Literally, there's something like that taking place. Millions of dollars being allocated, but they can't go to Afghanistan because it's shut down, but they still receive the money. Every year the check goes out. It's deposited and nobody asks any question. What's happening? And then you find out that this organization, just one person, the wife of somebody who has a 70% overhead. So you give her $1 million, she puts $700,000 in her pocket, she sits back and does nothing. That is the entire way the system works. It's time to bring it to an end. And that's what's happening here. This corruption is from the bottom to the top. And the mainstream media was disguising it because they were part of the corruption. Every single one of them. At some point in time, they forgot what it meant to be a journalist. And they started becoming a slave of corporate interests. And corporate interests are part of the corruption because they work hand in glove. When I was with NBC News, I remember I worked with. They had a correspondent in the White House. I can't remember, Claire Shipman maybe. And every Sunday, these people would gather in the White House to get a briefing from the National Security Advisor, who at that time was Sandy Berger, and it would be off the record. So they would say an unnamed White House official. But the purpose of the briefing that time was for the White House to set the tone of the news cycle for the week. So the National Security Advisor comes out and throws stories out there. And then those stories get picked up, covered, and then on Monday they get a bigger story, a follow-up story on Wednesday. By Friday, talk about it. And then on next Sunday, they're doing the wrap-up on the Sunday talk shows. And then Sandy Berger holds another briefing. And that way the government controls the news cycle. And at that time, this was right in the aftermath of Operation Desert Fox, the whole case that the United States was making about WMD. And I said, hey, I can get you to expose Sandy Berger as a liar in 3 questions. You just have to ask the questions in sequence, and he'll be exposed as a liar. And they did. At the end of the 3rd question, he stopped Shipman. He said, I know that Scott Ritter works for NBC News, and I know he's responsible for these questions. If you ever use Scott Ritter again, you'll be kicked out of this pool. And when it was reported back to me, I was like, boom, we just got Sandy Berger, because of course, freedom of the press is the most important thing in America. My God, NBC is going to lead the charge. We're taking down the Clinton White House. Boom, boom, boom. I was fired the next week. Fired the next week. And that's when I knew that the media was never about telling the truth, never about honesty. It was always about the hand in glove relationship they had with the U.S. government and corporate money. That's the way it is, man. So you keep bringing up the mainstream media. Nima, stop. They don't matter. They really don't. I mean, who cares? No one cares. No one's watching it. This show might get more views than half the shows you see on mainstream media nowadays. So, you're the news maker. What kind of corporate money you taking, Nima? What kind of corruption you fronting for?